Say my name. I am awake. I am the danger. I am the one who knocks.
Welcome to what is another episode of Breaking into Breaking Bad. This is season 4, episode 7, Problem Dog. Caves, you want to do the honors of giving us just a quick rehash of what happens in this episode for those for whom it has been a while since they've seen it?
Yeah. So Jesse is still coming down off of the high of his interaction with him killing Gale. We see it kind of come to a head finally in this episode. He kind of spills the beans at his therapy sessions on why he was there in the first place, trying to sell meth to everyone, and kind of breaks down in when he goes through that admission. You even see him in the beginning of the episode relive it as he's playing his video games, the encounter when he shot Gale. So that's kind of what's going on with Jesse. We also see the meeting between the cartel and Gus come, and you don't really know a lot about what was said at the end. You only see the beginning part of the discussion. I'm sure we'll see more here in the next few episodes. Walt's kind of come to an acceptance of he thinks that his life is going to be killed at any second now. He doesn't really know what to do. Comes up with a plan with Jesse finally trying to end Gus's life and get back to how things were. And then also with Hank, he finally makes a big move with his next steps in discovering the Heisenberg and his intuition into Gus at Pollos Hermanos. So it was a fun one.
Yeah, the title Problem Dog. It's kind of a weird name for a episode. Any ideas?
I believe so. When Jesse was spilling the beans at his at the therapy session with the group, he basically didn't want to say that he had to put down Gale, so he used a dog in the sense to hide it and mask it. And he said that he wasn't a bad dog. It was just a problem dog and had to handle it. So that's my opinion, I guess.
Yeah, dog. That's what I was thinking too. I don't think there's any other explanation.
Yeah.
But I think it tells us that guilt over the murder of Gale is central to Jesse right now. If you want to understand what's going on with Jesse, you got to understand that he's dealing with the guilt, which is not something that every character deals with, right? Like Walt's not eaten up that he had to shoot those drug dealers, right? Who were going to basically kill Jesse. I mean, Walt doesn't seem to have any guilt at all over any of the people that he's killed. He doesn't wake up in the middle of the night thinking about Crazy Eight or something like that. You know, I mean, even though he's done some pretty gruesome killings. So that just tells us or reminds us that Walt and Jesse are not the same kind of person here, and that Jesse is living more in the moral universe than Walt is.
Right.
And you're right, it's really telling in the intro when he's playing that first person shooter game. And for me, watching these episodes, it's like watching it for the first time, because I don't remember any of it. Mm-hmm. But when he was playing that game, I knew exactly what was coming. I knew he was going to see Gale's face.
Right.
Yeah, that's what happens. Well, the weird situation with Walt and the Dodge Charger. So the voice of reason, in a lot of ways, Skyler convinces Walt that they've got to return the car so that they can keep up the farce that they're, not, so that they don't draw attention from the IRS. And this is interesting, right? It's smart on one hand. It's shrewd, right? She's being really careful so they don't get caught, so that they can be good bad guys, right?
Right.
On the other hand, Walt is, I think, reasonably also in a way like, hey, look, to be a good bad guy means you get to enjoy the fruits of your labor. And I made this money. I wanted to buy it from my son, and I'm not able to do that. So he ends up going a little bit crazy, and instead of returning the charger, he takes it for a joyride that ends in destroying the car. And he goes crazy. I mean, he goes loco. And it was like Heisenberg, right behind the wheel. I would never have imagined Walt. Can you imagine Walt again in the first episode on that little stupid stair stepper thing?
No, yeah, I mean, you're right.
Doing
This is the
donuts
first
in the
time
parking lot.
he actually got to enjoy, and oh man, he had such a blast in that
Oh
empty
yeah,
parking lot. I mean, he was all over the place.
all over the place. First he's over here, and then he's over there, and yeah, and then he does an act that is supremely. What does it suggest? It suggests that he's in complete control, and to own something. One definition of ownership is the right to dispose of a thing. If you have the right to dispose of it, means that you own it. Well, Walt thoroughly disposes of that charger, right? I mean, once he gets it, I mean, it's not even like it's mechanically disabled or something. He just gets it high up on that parking bar thing. And then it's like he wanted it to blow up. It's like he wanted to destroy it. So then he lights the gas can on fire, or the gas tank, and he walks away from it slowly, right? Like as if he's in a movie. It's like he's watching himself
Yes.
in a movie, right?
You thought he was going to do the no look explosion and just keep on walking, but he actually takes a seat and wants to enjoy it.
Enjoy the sight. Yeah, right. So what all does that say about Walt? Like, what's he going through right now?
I think it just fed into his personality that he's created. This Heisenberg character, it just kind of fed into the ego. It made him feel more in charge of things because he had just come from losing an argument with Skylar after he promised Walt Jr. that he was not going to let Skylar take it away. And then, she basically made him just go do errands and chores. And this was his way of really saying, haha, this was, I did this because I wanted to, and I chose to do this. Like, he's regaining his masculinity through these silly, just childish things.
I've mentioned this book before, but I'll mention it again. And it's a short book by Dostoevsky called Notes from Underground. And it's in a lot of ways, it's very emblematic of existential philosophy. And it opens up with this monologue from the main character, whose inner life you get a real insight into. And the character is bound and determined not to be limited by acting rationally. He's going to express his freedom, even if it means acting irrationally. Why? Because he chose. And that's the primary thing. And so in the example in the book, he has a liver disease, and the doctor told him to take this medicine. And that's the reasonable thing to do. Take the medicine, get your liver healed. But you know what? Dang it. He doesn't want the doctor telling him what to do. And if he doesn't want to take the medicine, he's not going to take the medicine. Now, it's irrational for him not to, but he doesn't care. He cares mostly about living by his own lights. Cabes, your little personal history here. Your first word when you were a toddler, I think it's important for the audience to hear this. Your first word was don't.
Correct.
And you were kind of a kid that was sort of like this, right? Like, what is it that you would say? If someone told you to do something, even if it was in your interest, and even if you really wanted to do the thing, if someone told you to do it, how did that make you feel?
I immediately did not want to do it. But again, that's me as a child.
Yeah, no, you're much more rational now, for sure. Right. But I think we can get a glimpse into sort of Walt's psyche here. When you nailed it. Like, he doesn't want to be an errand boy. who, go do this, return this, come back with that, buy more of this. He wants to express a degree of freedom, even if it means doing irrational things. If that's the only option left to him, he'll do it.
Right.
Now, I think we also have to add to this that Walt is feeling, how do we say? Well, he feels that death is around the corner because he's convinced that Gus is going to kill him at any time. He's going to turn around and there's Gus or Mike, and they're going to shoot him, and that'll be the end of it. So I think he feels sort of like someone who was told, kind of like he was at the beginning of the show, you've only got X amount of days left to live. And remember, he broke bad. Like, he did a pretty extreme thing. And here he this is a little glimpse of a little small breaking bad again. He knows, well, I haven't got long to live. I'll probably never get another chance to do donuts in a Charger. I'm going to do it now. Screw the consequences.
Right.
So I think that's important for us to kind of just note what state of mind Walt is in right now, where he feels death is around the corner, so he doesn't care about consequences as much. And he's also rebelling against people telling him to do the rational thing, and he'll do the irrational thing just in order to express his own freedom of will.
Yeah, he's taken the whole carpe diem to a different level.
Yeah, I'll say.
What
Yeah,
was the total damages? Saul told him it was $52,000 worth of damage. His joyride cost him
$52,000, and Walt can just reasonably say, "Yeah, it was worth it." $52,000. Well, meanwhile, Jesse is looking pretty healthy these days. He's cleaning the walls of his house, which tells me the party is over. The party that was supposed to never stop is finally over, and he's cleaning up.
Yeah.
Now, it's not like he's, I don't know, going on a diet and doing a lot of exercise and all that, but there's something about cleaning his house that tells me he's cleaning the interior of his life as well.
Yeah, I feel like he's finally found, in a weird way, he's found purpose in a sense of being wanted and needed. But at the same time, he's also catching on to the fact that might be being played and used at the same time. But regardless, it's still having a positive effect on the way he views himself moving forward.
Yeah. So we got to say, Gus's plan worked.
Right.
Gus's plan to trick Jesse into thinking that he's a hero worked, as it lit a fire under him, because that was he was at a pretty low place where people were stealing from him and he didn't even care.
Right.
And Mike was like, this is really dangerous because he could turn on all of us. He has no reason not to. So on one hand, Gus is helping him. On the other hand, Gus is probably figuring out when he's going to get rid of them. And so Walt has to remind Jesse of all the things that Gus did to them and remind him, like, hey, this is the guy that threatened us and tried to kill us. And if you hadn't taken that extreme action, like, we would all be dead by now. And he kind of has to wake him up a little bit. And I'm not really sure how awake Jesse is to that reality.
I feel like he's coming around, especially since when Walt is just putting on this salesmanship of, they don't really think you're that naive, do they?
Right.
Like, he knows that Walt is just trying to get at him. He knows that.
Yeah.
But he also knows that there's some truth to what Walt is saying, because Walt is saying, like, listen, like, you should be frightened for your life just as much as I'm frightened for mine. You're getting into this whole idea of you're untouchable, but you're not. Like, they're just trying to find a way to replace us at this point.
Yeah. And I think Walt, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think Walt has proven, he's demonstrated that he has Jesse's good in mind. I won't say he has Jesse's good above his own good.
Right.
But he definitely is not, I think he'll take a bullet for Jesse. I mean, I think he's put himself in such situations before. when he intervened and killed those two drug dealers who worked for Gus because they were going to kill Jesse, at that point, I mean, Walt could have just let them kill Jesse, and he could have carried on, and he could have worked with Gale, and they could have had a working lab, and Walt could have continued to make his millions just like he wanted. But it shows when he did that, he put all of that at risk, not just his capacity to make money, but his life.
Yep.
And that's got to tell Jesse, like, hey, when Walt is telling you this, he's probably not got some agenda and some angle, and he's trying to take advantage of you. Now, again, we said it's not that he has Jesse's good above his own, but that he sees them as kind of connected.
Yeah, and he brought that up when he was doing the whole spiel, and you even see Jesse just kind of shrug and grudgingly accept being reminded of that, about how Gus treated the little boy and all this kind of stuff. He's throwing on a guilt trip for sure, but at the same time, you're right. He was reminding him that you need to be just as worried as I am, and we need to stick together. And you see that when Jesse does say, all right, I'll kill him.
Yeah. And so then they start the plan to poison him.
Right. The ricin.
Right. Meanwhile, back at the car wash, Skylar is starting to take over and going to be managing things. And Walt brings in the money that they're supposed to sort of mix in with the car wash income to launder it. And it's a whole lot more than Skylar expected, which is a detail that I'm sort of like, how did they not? Surely when they were hatching this plan and they were figuring out what kind of business to get, surely Skylar asked Walt at some point, how much do you bring in every month? I failed to believe that she just forgot. Yeah,
they kind of had that discussion, on camera for us right then and there. Because he was just like, I thought you wanted to have control of this, Skylar, and he rounds up like, it's more like $7.5 million a year.
Well, she points out that there's no car wash in the country that can generate that kind of cash, and that's if they don't make any money on the cars. That's just if they try and launder that money. So that problem remains unresolved. We're not really sure how that's gonna go. And Walt basically tells Skylar, deal with it, figure it out.
Right.
So Hank and Walter Jr. make their way to Pollos Hermanos. And Hank is back in his game. Like you said, he's no longer this apathetic, interested in minerals for we don't ever get to know why. But he's there, and he seems to have this plan the whole time to try and get Gus's fingerprints.
If you notice, if you ever watch this part again, I'm sure you'll give it a third or fourth or fifth go around again.
Oh, of course.
But if you notice, the entire time, Hank, when he grabs his cup, he only grabs it by the lid. He never grabs it by the actual cup, because he wanted to make sure that the prints from Gus would be uninhibited.
Genius. Wow, there's another level of detail I wouldn't have thought they would have considered.
Yeah, but the entire time he's holding it in such a weird way, but he's holding it from the top, basically on the lid the whole time.
Huh.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Well, mission accomplished. He gets his fingerprints, and we know at the end what he's doing.
What did you think about how he presented the whole idea to Gomi and the boss?
I thought it was very persuasive,
right?
Because he says, "Yeah, that seems reasonable." Looking, what you just said, or I agree. It seemed crazy to me too, and until this app, or whatever. Like he follows along. In fact, actually, like it's a part of classical rhetoric, like the structure of a speech or an argument that you make. Part of the last part of it is when you come up with possible objections and you answer them, and that's what he does in this speech. He steelmans the argument against it, and then he knocks that argument down.
Right.
And he says, yeah, you'd think this. And I agree. That seems really weird. And then he goes on to show how, even in spite of that, his hypothesis is reasonable and seems to have proof.
Yeah, the way he presented it, just like as like a question almost. What does Gomi say?
Right.
Is like, if there's a drug deal at KFC, you don't just go banging on the door of Colonel Sanders,
right,
or something like
right.
that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they cheated a little bit because they didn't show us when Hank is doing all that research into the company.
Right.
So all we know is that he had the fingerprints, but he doesn't even bring that up. He doesn't even bring in evidence, I don't think, right? Where he says, I ran his fingerprints and found them here, there. No, he does at the very end. He says his fingerprints were all over
Gail
Gail's
Bedeker's
apartment.
house. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So no, that's right. And that was the that was the kicker. That's the clincher.
Yes.
Right? Like all the other stuff is sort of
that now he's like, I'm on to something.
Right. Right. And my first thought was, I don't think Gus has ever been to Gail Bedeker's house. And then my second thought was, no, he definitely was. When he goes over and tells Gail that Walt has cancer and how soon can Gail take over. And so I remembered that now. I don't remember. I wonder if I went back and watched that episode, if I would see Gus like touching things.
Right.
I don't know. Because if he just walks in, sits down at the couch and leaves, then wouldn't necessarily have left his fingerprints anywhere. But maybe he'd come over at other times too.
True.
Well, okay, so the meeting with the cartel, that's an interesting scene. Mm-hmm. First off, Jesse has the perfect opportunity to poison the coffee, and he doesn't do it. Why?
Obviously, he's scared, right? I mean, who wouldn't be in that situation? Mike's right behind you. He knows that Mike's can see everything. He still has to take it out of the cigarette. But you're right. It would have been a good time. And they even show... afterwards, they made a point to show Gus drinking the coffee.
Yeah, right.
Funny.
Yeah, no, they definitely showed that. Okay, so you said it was an act of cowardice, that he was just afraid.
I wouldn't say cowardice. I would just say he's more careful now because he knows that, and they even discussed it. So, like, you can't just shoot him. You'll never make it out alive. It's got to be thought out carefully.
Well, you can call it being too careful, but as I understand it, being too controlled by fear is cowardice, and not being controlled enough is rashness. And in the past, we've seen, and most people kind of tend to be more one than the other. Most people don't tend to be courageous, and in fact, most people tend to be cowards rather than rash. But we've seen Jesse how many times before be rash and say, well, I'm just going to shoot him. I'm going to just bum rush him. I'm going to just go in there and just do this thing. Right. Like, or when he's sitting in the car with Mike, he's sitting there 30 seconds. He's like, oh, I'm going to go knock on that door. I'm going to go get them to come out. Like, Jesse, for whatever reason, tends toward rashness. That's his nature. It takes him to sort of be an act of the will for him to land on that courage right in the middle between cowardice and rashness.
Yeah.
So I'll say it seems out of character for him to be moved by fear so much that he's overly careful. Most of the time he's not careful enough. So it was just interesting to me that he fails in that moment. And then, like you said, we see that it would have worked. So the cartel doesn't show up. They send their lackey. They send their Mike, I guess, right?
Right. This was the same guy that was eating the sandwich after they shot up.
Oh, I didn't notice that. The truck. Yeah.
Correct.
Well, it was a bold move to send that guy instead of the cartel. It shows that you're not equal to us.
Right. Disrespectful.
You worked with our disrespectful. Yeah. But they seem to have leverage over Gus because they seem as though they're holding all the cards. All the chips, rather. And they're like, what we want. We're not negotiating. You're either going to do what the cartel wants or you're not. There's no compromise. There's no meeting halfway.
Which we don't really even know what it is that they want yet.
We don't know what they want, and we don't know why Gus feels like he has to give them what they want.
Right. But we know it's more valuable to them than $50 million.
Right.
So,
Which I thought was a really dumb move. Because they could just say, yes, we promise we won't, we'll take the 50 million, we promise we won't do anything. And then be like, oh, we lied. Sorry. We're gonna need enough.
yeah.
That was a really dumb move, I thought, on Gus's part. So I don't know what he was thinking there. Because there's no way they could have enforced that. All they could have done is
you never
complain.
know. He might have
go to the police.
He might have wanted to just do, hey, let's do $50 million and then, put ricin all over the $50 million. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Something about it just seemed off for Gus. Normally, Gus is the guy who's thought everything out, and that just didn't seem thought out enough. So Mike and Jesse are talking after that, and Mike tells Jesse that Gus sees loyalty in him because Jesse's now he's running through Walt's advice, and he's like, yeah, what do they see in me? They really don't see anything in me. And Mike tells him, yeah, no, I think Gus sees loyalty in you, but then he says loyalty maybe for the wrong person. And it goes back to something I was saying before, where Gus is trying to divide Walt and Jesse. And if he can peel Jesse off and make him more loyal to him or to Mike, then he's won. I mean, it's easy to pick them both off apart. Right. And maybe, just maybe, that had something to do with why Jesse hesitated to poison the coffee, because he's starting to feel a loyalty to Mike and to Gus. Maybe not completely, but just enough that he's hesitating. Right. And that's this is exactly what Gus was orchestrating.
Yeah.
Again, could be wrong, but
yeah, I like it.
Okay. So then we go to the recovery meeting and Jesse's there. And why is Jesse there? I mean, it's another sign that Jesse seems to be looking out for his own health and doing the right thing. And he's wanting catharsis, right? He wants to cleanse his soul. And so he goes to the only place he knows. And he's kind of an ass. Like, he's talking, he's yelling at people, he's putting people down. And he's like got to get this off his chest, I guess. So he's now the guy invites him to talk. But then it's weird, right? He says that he doesn't like it when people say there's no judgment. He says, I want you to judge me. He wants to judge himself and his own actions. And that to me deserves a lot of time that we probably don't have right now. But it's important for him as a moral agent to be able to say that action was wrong.
Right.
And he's wanting other people to say, you're right, Jesse, that action was wrong. And so when he says, yeah, I killed this dog, and that one woman's like, well, you're some piece of shit. Like, why'd you do that? And he's like, thank you. Like, he wants her to agree with that part in him that says that was wrong and I shouldn't have done it. Because I think in order to sort of sleep at night, he has to tell himself, well, it was justified. Well, it wasn't wrong in this case because these extenuating circumstances or what. And so I think it's really a sign of health, moral health, that he is still conflicted in a way that Walt is not. Tuco.
Right. I was going to say, right? It brings back to what you said, how Walt just lets the guilt slide right over him. The only time we felt that Walt had that was when he was in the Fly episode, when he was in the lab and he broke down a little bit about
right
Jane. But that's the only time. We haven't really seen him feel sorry for killing all the other people that he's killed, because it was out of self-preservation and it was the right thing to do. But Jesse has not been able to put this one in that same context like Walt has.
And remember that scene when Walt is sitting on the bed with Skylar, and she's like, "Why don't you tell me, what's going on?" And he's like, "No, firewall, like church and state, like separate, right?" Like, he doesn't allow himself to remember and think about the things he's done. There's a complete separation in his mind, in his soul. He's not at one, where Jesse is striving to maintain a unity in his soul, not a division. There's an integrity there that is lacking in somebody like Walt. Well, we already talked about the last scene, which is Hank and Walter Jr. talking to Gomi and the DEA boss about his evidence showing that there's a connection between the killing of Gale and Gus.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we leave off, kind of foreboding what's coming. But Hank is just like that shark. I mean, he just no.
He's hot on the trail now.
Yeah. Hank's back.
Hank's back, baby. Let's go.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, always please like, share, and subscribe. You can find these episodes on Apple Podcast and YouTube, and you could follow and contact us on Twitter and Patreon at Breaking Into BB. We will see you next time as we break into another episode of Breaking Bad.